February 28th, the raid happened. The evening of the 28th, the raid was over. We went back into our rooms and stayed there for some time. I don't have a very accurate and good memory of what kind of time frame there was between the 28th and when I left, but I know it was very short. From what I've been told since, it was March 2nd, roughly, so there was a day or two in between. My memory went straight to myself leaving the compound, the building itself. I actually remember walking through that entryway. There was mattresses on the ground, which I'd assumed had been used to prop up and be in front of the windows. They were then, laying flat. There was insulation to the mattresses everywhere. I looked up at the door, and I almost have like it's imprinted in my memory. A Swiss cheese door. That's the best way I can explain it. I didn't know what to make of it as an 11-year-old walking through these doors. It looked like something I would have seen in the movies. Not anything I would have ever expected to be part of or witness myself. We went through the doorway, and outside was some vans. They loaded us up into it, myself, my siblings, and some of the other children who went out on that day as well. If I recall properly, there's 2 vans we loaded up, and we headed off the property. They took us to a Methodist home. We were there for a little while. I remember a little bit here and there. Don't have a great memory of that. It may be that, my mind was elsewhere at the time and trying to make sense of the craziness that was going on. But as I said before, I was used to change, so I think I took on a role of making sure that my siblings were doing okay as well, looking after them, because at that point, I was the oldest. I was the one that, felt responsible for making sure they were taken care of. We weren't there too long. We then were taken into a room where there sat a man who I honestly really didn't recognize. Didn't know who he was. I hadn't seen him in 7 years, give or take. But it was my dad sitting there. And he immediately came over and hugged us, warm welcome. We spoke to some people, did a little bit of interviewing, I suppose. Don't really have a very good memory of all that. And then we headed up to where he was stationed. At that time, he was currently still serving in the Air Force. My mother had met him in the Air Force in Alaska. He was now stationed in South Dakota. We went up there. It was midway, being that it was April, it was halfway through a school year. So we just jumped into the middle of that school year. I remember the most difficult part of it for me, which was interesting being that I was so used to change, was adapting to the new place. I was so used to having all these other kids and being my friends, and then I'm thrown into this new environment with people I don't know. You know how you see in the movies about high school, and you get your cliques, and kids tend to gravitate to kids they think are cool like them, and are like them, and they're interested in the same stuff. And I'm this outsider coming in, trying to figure out where do I fit into this whole picture. That was by far the hardest part for me. I felt like I was accustomed to change and stuff, but it was still difficult. Transitioning back to, for lack of a better term right now, civilized life, where we had electricity and running water for toilets. You never imagine how much you can appreciate a toilet when you were used to having to take the bucket outside, dig a hole, dump it in there, and cover it back up. So it was not something that I looked past easily. I definitely appreciate my toilets nowadays. But life went back to much like it was before. My dad was still military, so pretty same routine. He was always a very active dad, very disciplinarian, made sure that we were well behaved and did what we were told. And the years went by, or actually at the end of that year, that half year that we finished, he then got stationed in Keesler in Mississippi, where we moved to. I believe I want to say 7th grade is when I was starting there. We moved to Biloxi, Mississippi when I started 7th grade. And this was a place where most people, again, had been born and raised there, so I was this new kid coming from outside, trying to figure out where do I fit in to this whole new world that I'm having to readjust to again. But it was definitely not terrible, but I can look back at the different phases of my childhood, the pre-Waco, Waco, and then post-Waco. And when I look at them as different phases, the one that I was most happy or during and about was the 3 years in Waco. They left me the best memories.